What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so basically we're going to cover Spider-Man The Lost Hunt. Now, this storyline just wrapped up very recently, but it is a retcon. It takes place back in the 1990s in the middle of the Clone Saga. Now, you're probably wondering, hey, Fresh, how do you know this storyline takes place in the middle of Clone Saga? Well, let me explain. 1. Mary Jane is pregnant. Number 2, they live in Oregon. Number 3, Peter Parker had lost his powers by this point in the Clone Saga. Now, with all those things being said right there, we can tell that basically this right now is in the middle of the Clone Saga. Now, of course, with this story being called The Lost Hunt, you should know that basically it has connections to Kraven, and it does. But either way, though, this storyline right here is wrapping up loose ends that have basically happened in the 1990s. Let me explain. So in the 80s, we all know that Kraven died in the last hunt. He basically killed himself, and that was it. But in the 1990s, we found out that Kraven had a son, and that son was Vladimir. Now, Vladimir became the Grim Hunt, and of course, he wanted to hunt down Spider-Man to get revenge for his father. And he was also, like his father, obsessed with hunting Spider-Man. And so you had Grim Hunt try to chase down Spider-Man. The problem was, though, this was right in the middle of the Clone Saga. So you had Ben Reilly, you had Kane, you had a lot of things going on. But in the middle of the Clone Saga, Kane had killed the Grim Hunt. And when that happened, basically, of course, it was another Kraven character dying in the 1990s. But here's the thing, though. There was another character known as Gregor. And Gregor was a servant to Kraven, the first Kraven. But of course, he was there when he saw Kraven killed himself. And then he watched Kraven's son, Vladimir, also kill himself. And so because Gregor saw both people die, Kraven and Vladimir, you had Gregor say, I am going to get revenge on Spider-Man. The problem is, though, in the 1990s, a lot of storylines were not wrapped up, and this was one of them. All he said was, I am going to get revenge on Spider-Man. Nothing ever happened. And so that is why we have The Lost Hunt, to say this is a lost story that's going to wrap up Gregor's revenge on Peter Parker. And so, of course, it's Gregor going after Spider-Man, Peter Parker, who's right now powerless. Now, the opening pages of this book, we actually do pick up with Kraven coming out of the ground alive. Like he basically was buried alive and he's coming out of the ground alive, of course. Now, with that being said, though, this right here is actually very huge because it's kind of reminding us what happened in Kraven's last hunt, where you saw Peter Parker get buried alive, and of course, he had to fight his way out of that grave, and he did. But this storyline right here is going to explain why Kraven actually did that and why burying someone in the grave is actually very important. Now, with that being said, you do have somebody talking to us, and they're telling us that basically they were the ones who brought Kraven back to life, but also they were the ones who had killed Kraven. And so you have this person say, Kraven's ghost still haunts them. And you're kind of like, okay, who are you? And of course, we have no idea. Now, that is the moment where we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now, jumping rooftop to rooftop. Now, the reason why he's doing this because he's having a hard time not being Spider-Man because he did lost his powers. Let me explain. So back in the 1990s, Marvel wanted to get rid of Peter Parker. They felt like maybe if they remove him and put someone else in his shoes, the sales will go right back up for Spider-Man comics. And so they basically depowered him, had him and Mary Jane move to Oregon. And then you had Ben Reilly take over for him as Spider-Man. And so right now in Oregon, you have a Peter Parker who's just been depowered and he's having a hard time not being Spider-Man. And so he is jumping rooftop to rooftop to kind of remind himself the times of being Spider-Man. The problem is, though, he almost fell off a rooftop and could have died. And so, of course, it's kind of like, dude, stop. You're no longer Spider-Man. It's hard to believe, But at the same time, you cannot kill yourself because you have a wife and a child on the way. You have to get a hold of your life and yourself. Now, of course, he does try to sneak back into his apartment, hoping not to wake up Mary Jane. But of course, Mary Jane knew that Peter Parker was not home, not in bed. And on top of that, she kind of knew that he was out there doing something to kind of remind him the times of being Spider-Man. Now, of course, you do have Mary Jane and Peter Parker talk. And this is why I say fans miss this so much. The marriage of Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Because they were like a power couple in Marvel Comics. They had a lot of great moments. And honestly, if this story had actually came out in the 1990s, this would have been a great moment because it's Mary Jane kind of trying to understand what her husband is actually going through and not trying to give him a hard time, but also be a shoulder that he put his head on because right now he's going through a lot, fighting the urge of not being Spider-Man or the urge of being Spider-Man, sorry. And so right now she's kind of like, okay, I get it. You are no longer Spider-Man, but at the same time, we have to realize that you have so much other things to live for now. A child, a marriage, and a new life here in Oregon. And so, of course, it's her trying to understand what he's going through, but to also show him the light in the path. Like, hey, look down the road and see all the great things that are about to come your way now with you not being Spider-Man anymore. The problem is, though, Peter Parker is also not telling Mary Jane the 100% truth on what's going on right now with him. Because right now in his mind, it feels like something is attacking his mind. Some kind of mental attack. And of course, it's him kind of reminding himself all the different times when he was Spider-Man and fighting against all those different kinds of villains. But of course, this mental attack is doing a toll on him, and not just kind of like his emotions, but also kind of like when he goes to sleep. He's not really able to go to sleep. And so right now, this mental attack is taking a toll on his daily life. Now, you do have the book kind of tell us that basically the reason why Peter Parker is having this mental attack happen right now on him is because of Gregor. Because Gregor is now trying to kill Lost Spider-Man to get revenge against Spider-Man for the death of Kraven, but also Grim Hunt as well. And so right now you do have Gregor kind of like, yes, my plan is working. Sooner or later, I'll be able to actually kill Lost Spider-Man and get revenge for my lost dear friends. Now, you do have the story kind of give us Mary Jane's side of the story. Like, how is she feeling? What's going on with her right now? Because she knows that even though Peter Parker had basically shared some things that are going on in his mind, he did not tell her everything that was going on in his mind. And so basically right now, it's Mary Jane realizing that her husband is hiding something from her. The problem is, though, she has no idea what he's actually hiding. And so with that, she's kind of like, he's trying to protect me, but at the same time, I know he's hiding something from me, and it's hurting him and possibly could hurt me down the road. Now, with that being said, though, while she leaves for work, she's right. Something is wrong with Peter Parker. There is some kind of mental attack happening over and over again. And it seems like there's some kind of creature in the mind of Peter Parker. Some kind of spider creature. And this creature right now is eating away in all the good things in Peter Parker's mind. And basically making him a very different kind of person. A person who's right now very worried for himself, but also his wife and his unborn child. Now, we actually do jump over to Gregor. And honestly, this is the moment where we actually do see that Gregor is the one who is attacking the mind of Peter Parker. Because what Gregor tells us is that basically he has been sitting down and taking a bunch of potions and herbs to basically be able to attack the mind of Peter Parker. And so the mental attacks that Peter Parker is having at the moment right now are all coming from Gregor. It's him slowly trying to break down Spider-Man because he is trying to actually kill off Spider-Man. Now, this is a Gregor who has no idea that Peter Parker has been depowered. And so with that, he honestly thinks that he'll be just like Kraven or just like Grim Hunt. He's going to hunt the spider, of course, Spider-Man. But he has no idea that Peter Parker is no longer Spider-Man. And so right now, it's Gregor thinking he has a huge hunt coming down the road. Now, even though you have Mary Jane very worried about her husband and wondering what she could do to basically help him, of course, you also have Mary Jane right now still saying like, listen, we're in a new city. We still have to work. We still got to make some money. We still have a house or an apartment to pay bills in and everything. And so right now you have her saying to us that basically when she arrived to Oregon, she got a job as an assistant to help teach, I want to say a theater class. But either way, it's her saying life still moves on. But at the same time, she wants to help her husband out because she's very worried for him. Now, we actually jump over to Peter Parker. Now, you do have Peter Parker right now at his day job, but I do want to point out that Peter Parker does look physically and mentally drained. Like the dude is actually going through it right now because those mental attacks, they keep him up at night. And so, of course, he is unable to basically sleep. But right now, you have Peter Parker at work just looking like he is physically and mentally defeated. But that is the moment he is actually confronted by Tracy Macaba. Now, at first, it does seem like Tracy Macaba is just some random teacher who's kind of at his campus doing some kind of lecture and that is it. But in reality, she is going to be a very important character. But here's the thing, though. As soon as she talks to Peter Parker worries goes away. Like he is back to normal. And that right there is crazy because earlier he did look mentally drained, physically drained, and now he looks perfectly okay. And of course, it's kind of like, what did she do? Because all she did was talk to him. Maybe she kind of put something in his drink or what? We have no idea. But homeboy is now okay, and that right there is very weird. But as soon as Tracy walks away, well, that is the moment you do have Peter Parker being attacked once again in his mind. And of course, this time he's seeing images of his old enemies when he was Spider-Man. And so, of course, with him seeing those guys, but of course they look very creepy, like he's kind of like something is going on with my mind. I cannot think straight. Like it feels like I'm being constantly attacked over and over and over again. And at first it was kind of like, okay, maybe Peter Parker is fighting against the urges of wanting to be Spider-Man all over again. But the thing is, we know it's Gregor. We know it is Gregor kind of mentally attacking Peter Parker over and over and over again. And so you do have Peter Parker run out of his job to basically get away. And of course, outside his job is Gregor just smiling because again, it is Gregor attacking the mind of Peter Parker and making his life a living hell. Now, you do have Peter Parker basically get back home, and of course, he is confronted by Mary Jane. But when he does see Mary Jane, this is Mary Jane showing Peter Parker that basically she's worried about her husband. She is worried at the idea that something is really wrong with him. She even says, okay, I think we need to call you a therapist. Like, let's find you a therapist. Now, Peter Parker's like, no, I don't need a therapist. But of course, the way he says it is kind of like, I'm very upset in the idea that you actually think I need a therapist because you think I'm crazy. And he yells at Mary Jane. And so she says, fine, I'm going to leave the room and give you space. Now, this is not Mary Jane giving up on her husband. This is Mary Jane saying, I'm going to back off for now, but later on, I'm coming back because you're my husband and we need to figure out what in the world is going on with you. Now, right after Mary Jane and Peter Parker had their argument, you have Gregor outside watching Peter Parker. And that is the moment you have Gregor basically shoot some darts into the room that Peter Parker was in. Now, these darts, of course, begin the process of Peter Parker hallucinating. And of course, you have Peter Parker beginning to see this spider creature. Now, this actually ties into what Kraven, Grim Hunt, and also Gregor think of Peter Parker. And what I mean is that they have no idea that Peter Parker was bit by a radioactive spider. But to Kraven, Gregor, and Grim Hunt, they look at Peter Parker and say, no. When it comes to Peter Parker, he was chosen by a spider god. This spider god had chose Peter as its next host, its next hero, whatever. They have no idea that it was Peter Parker being a kid and just being bit by a spider. And so right now in Peter Parker's mind, he's being confronted by a spider god, because this is what Gregor wants Peter Parker to see right now in his mind. It's Gregor saying, I want you to actually think that you were chosen by a spider god. And this spider god is here now to basically torture you because you have basically left the life of Spider-Man. And you cannot do that because Spider God had basically chosen you to stop being a nerd and be this great hero. Like, it's really the Spider God trying to torture the mind of Peter Parker. But the Spider God is not even real because it's just really Gregor using some kind of potion, herbs that he kind of threw together as a poison to poison the mind of Peter to make Peter think there is a spider god. But of course, after this entire whole section is over with and you have Peter Parker able to actually defeat the spider god in his mind, his entire room that he was in is trash. It was a lot of trash all over the place. And you have Mary Jane run back in and realize that something is wrong with her husband because she just left him a moment ago. And when she comes back, the entire apartment or that room he was in is completely trashed. Now you have Gregor actually very happy in what he did to Peter Parker. It's Gregor saying, look at what I did. Look what I accomplished. I have now broken the mind of Peter Parker. But of course, I am not going to do the same thing Kraven and Grim Hunt did, which is that they failed when it came to killing off Spider-Man. It's Gregor saying he will make sure that Peter Parker dies tonight or dies this week or whenever. But Peter Parker is going to die. Now, when you have Gregor leave, there is someone else watching Gregor. And you can tell it's some kind of lady. But of course, we have no idea who this lady actually is. Now, as we get into the second chapter, we basically do pick up right now with Gregor kind of training his body, because even though he is basically attacking the mind of Peter Parker, he's also want to make sure that he is physically ready, because this is Gregor basically not realizing that Spider-Man is not Spider-Man anymore. Peter Parker is not Spider-Man. He does not have his powers. And so, of course, it's Gregor getting ready for a battle that could not actually happen because Peter Parker, again, does not have his Spider-Man powers. But either way, though, while you have Gregor kind of getting ready for this battle, of course, that is the moment you have Gregor realize that somebody is watching him. He's kind of like, I knew you'd be around, but of course, I was not ready for you. And so, of course, I now must be ready for you because I feel like you might try to ruin my plans. But getting back over to Peter Parker, we are still seeing Peter Parker kind of getting over the idea that basically Homeboy had a complete breakdown, a mental breakdown. And of course, Mary Jane saw this mental breakdown. And so you do have Peter Parker kind of being helped by Mary Jane. Like, she's there for her husband. She's making sure that whatever he's going through, that she'll be there to basically help him through it. But here's the thing, though. Even though she's there to help, you do have Peter Parker tell her it feels like he's going through a huge withdrawal over the idea that he is no longer Spider-Man. But then you have Mary Jane once again say, you need to call in a therapist. There could be something actually wrong with you. But of course, it's Peter Parker not wanting to call a therapist. He feels like it's Mary Jane saying that he is crazy. But on top of that, his mind is broken. It's Gregor actually winning when it comes to the mind of Peter Parker. Now, we actually do jump back over to Gregor just real quickly, because it is Gregor kind of telling us that basically he is trying to turn over every single stone in the mind of Peter Parker. He wants to make sure that basically he'll be able to completely able to shut down the mind of Peter Parker. Now, he does tell us that basically when it comes to Gregor right now himself, that he's making sure that he is mentally and physically ready for the big battle against Peter Parker. But once again, while he's having these thoughts, of course, he realized that somebody is watching him. Somebody's in the room with him, watching over him. And of course, once again, we can tell it has to be some kind of lady. Now, we actually do pick up Peter Parker and Mary Jane going over Tracy Macaba's house. Now, remember, Tracy Macaba is basically this teacher or this professor that came to Peter Parker's campus earlier to do a lecture. But when we saw her earlier, she was able to talk to Peter Parker and kind of being able to bring some energy back into his life. Because when we saw Peter Parker earlier, when she was around, he was physically and mentally drained. But when she came around, it seemed like she was able to revive him, to bring some energy back into his life. And with that being said, this is Peter Parker and Mary Jane going to her house for dinner. But the entire time they're having dinner, Peter Parker's mind is somewhere else. Like he cannot focus on Mary Jane nor Tracy, because it seems like he's being attacked once again mentally by Gregor's work. And so, of course, the entire time Mary Jane, Tracy, they're talking and having a fun time, Peter Parker is not. He is going through the ringer. Now, Mary Jane can realize that Peter Parker is going through the ringer, and she's very worried for her husband. But then you have Tracy touch the hand of Peter Parker. And when she does that, it seems like she was able to calm down Peter Parker a lot. And for Mary Jane, that's very weird, because kind of like, what can she do that I can't do? He's my husband, but she was able to calm him down and bring him back to reality. Now, the next couple of days are basically not easy for Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Now, of course, for Mary Jane, it's the idea that she feels like she's kind of useless because she can't help her husband and what her husband is actually going through. And for Peter Parker, it's more the idea that basically right now, his mind is constantly being attacked over and over and over again. And so right now you have a Peter Parker who's going through the ringer. But of course, while you have these two characters going through different things in their lives, of course, that is the moment you have Gregor say, it's time for me to basically get rid of the spider. Now, you do have Peter Parker be kidnapped by Gregor. And with that happening, this is Gregor saying, yeah, this is going to be your final battle. I am going to make sure that I do finally kill off Spider-Man. This is going to be your end. And this is huge because you're now talking about the idea of Peter Parker possibly dying by the hands of Gregor. Now, of course, you do have Gregor say, it's me. You know who I am. And of course, you know why I'm here for, to get revenge for Kraven and Grimhunt. And so right now you have Peter Parker just trying to hold his own against Gregor. Now, their battle does go back and forth because Peter Parker is actually able to hold his own a tad bit. Not a lot, but just enough to kind of draw this battle out a little bit longer. But of course, with Peter Parker getting his butt kicked, it's kind of like there's no one coming to save Peter Parker's life. Because one, they're in the middle of Oregon. And two, there was no other character that was introduced so far in the storyline where it seems like maybe Peter Parker could possibly be saved by that person. And so right now, it really seems like Gregor is about to win by killing off Spider-Man. But of course, when he does pull the gun out, the same gun that Kraven used to kill himself, it's Gregor saying, I am going to use his gun to basically get my revenge for Kraven and also Grimhunt by killing you with this gun. But right when we're about to use the gun to kill off Peter Parker, someone does actually save Peter Parker's life. And that person is actually the mother of Gregor. And so getting into the third chapter, we basically do pick up right now with Gregor fighting against his mother. And we do kind of find out that basically his mother is no other than Tracy Macaba. She is the mother to Gregor. Now, with that being said, you do have Tracy kind of tell us that basically there was a point in time where she was the one raising Gregor, but something happened where you basically had Gregor kind of step away from his mother and basically follow along with Kraven, meaning that Kraven had Gregor at a very young age and somehow changed the opinions of Gregor to abandon his mom and follow him. Now, of course, this battle does go on for a good while, actually. You do have Gregor and his mom fight against one another for a few pages. But basically, this is her saying like her son has completely changed, that her son has abandoned everything that she had taught him, and he's following the way of Kraven. And of course, that is the wrong way, the way of course, being a bad guy. And so right now it's her trying to change her son around to be a better person. Now, in the middle of their battle, there's a moment where she's about to kill off her own son. But because the reason why they still have a connection, and because all the evilness inside of Gregor's body began to affect her, she almost killed her own son. But of course, she was stopped by Peter Parker. And after being stopped by Peter Parker, you do have Tracy say, okay, I need to get you out of here while my son Gregor is passed out after I had just defeated him. Now, that is the moment you do have Tracy basically tell Peter Parker that she's really here to kind of help Peter Parker out, to basically help him get through whatever he is actually going through. And so right now you have her tell Peter Parker that if you want to free what has happened to you thanks to Gregor, you have to fight what's going on in your mind at the moment. And basically right now in your mind, you're kind of trapping yourself, because ever since you became Spider-Man, this guilt in the idea that you have to be a hero has caused a lot of problems in your mind. And so of course you're kind of fighting against yourself, the Peter Parker persona and also the Spider-Man persona. You're battling both sides here at the moment. And with you doing that is causing a lot of problems actually for you. And so right now it's her saying, if you want to break free from what's happening to you, you kind of have to get rid of this guilt you have of being a hero, of being Spider-Man. But at the same time, it's her saying you have to break away from what's causing you to feel this guilt, but also defeating the spider creature inside of you. Now, we actually do jump over to Mary Jane. And right now, you have Mary Jane not knowing what in the world is going on with her husband at the moment. Because right now, she's at home. She has no idea that her husband is battling his inner demons, his guilt. And so right now, she's wondering, where in the world is my husband at? But then she begins to think of Aunt May. And this is Mary Jane saying, Aunt May was a strong woman. She always tried her best to make sure that everybody was basically taken care of. And so right now, it's her saying, if Aunt May can do that, I can do it too. I can make sure that my husband will be okay. I am here to basically help him out. Now, we actually do jump over to Peter Parker again. And you still have Peter Parker kind of battling against his inner demons. And with him kind of battling his inner demon is him kind of realizing that this spider creature that he's seeing right now inside his mind is not real. That this spider creature was made up, of course, by Gregor. And so, of course, it's right now Tracy kind of saying, hey, you have to realize that all that guilt, all these things you're feeling right now, and also the idea that some kind of spider god has been basically pulling you down, is not real. You have to basically restructure your mind into the way you had it before Gregor basically attacked your mind. You need to heal your mind up. And so, of course, after a few more pages, you actually do have Peter Parker being able to break free from whatever Gregor had actually done to him. Now, right after that, it does look like basically Peter Parker is completely healed again, which honestly looks like a great thing. The problem is, though, this is only part 3 of 5, which means we still have a lot of story to cover. And so right after you have Peter Parker feeling like everything is okay now, he does learn Tracy's real name, and her name is Orisha. Now, with that being said, right after he learned her name, of course, that is the moment his mind begins to fall apart all over again. He begins to act like some kind of animal, and he runs out of the actual warehouse building. And of course, now you have Orisha worried what's going to happen to Peter Parker. Of course, the reason why you have Peter Parker acting like an animal right now, because Gregor knew that he was being watched by his mother. And remember, in the earlier chapters, he did detect some kind of presence, somebody watching him. And of course, he knew it was his mother. And so this is basically him saying he knew that his mother was watching him, and he basically planned on trying to stop her from doing anything at all. And so, of course, he knew that basically sooner or later, he needs a backup plan to still affect Peter Parker. And of course, that backup plan did work, where he was actually able to have some kind of plan to continue the effects of his mental attack on Peter Parker to still work even after his mom had intervened. And so, of course, she does get attacked by his jaguar or leopard, whatever, but he is attacked by, or she's attacked by Gregor's animal. And so this is Gregor saying, you are way out of your league, Mom. I've been planning for this for a very long time. Now, of course, with Peter Parker acting like an animal, you do have Peter Parker basically going back home. And with him going back home, of course, it's Peter Parker right now still acting like an animal. And so with Mary Jane being home as well, you have Mary Jane wondering, okay, I hear my husband is home now. Let me see he's okay. The problem is, though, when she does go to confront Peter Parker, he is acting like an animal. He's about to attack his own wife. Now, as we jump into the 4th chapter, we basically do pick up right now with Peter Parker still acting like an animal. And of course, he's scaring Mary Jane, because this is Mary Jane never seeing something like this happen with Peter Parker. And so, of course, she has no idea what in the world can she actually do to basically help her husband out. Now, of course, with Peter Parker acting like an animal, he actually thinks he has his spider powers. And so, of course, he actually tries to jump onto a wall and thinking that he will stick to the wall, because his mind is still in the idea that he's an actual animal. But in reality, he's not a Spider-Man anymore. He does not have his spider powers anymore. And so, of course, when he tries that, he falls off and he begins to whimper. And of course, that tells Mary Jane that his mind is just lost, which is true. His mind is just wandering around different places right now. And so, of course, it's her wondering what can she do to actually help her man out. Now, that is the moment where we actually do learn about the origin of the mother of Gregor, Aja Orisha. And I really hope I pronounce her name correctly. But when it comes to Orisha, basically, she is from Wakanda. Now, her origin is actually going to give us the origin of Kraven in a way, or more information about the origin of Kraven. And you see what I mean as we go through her origin. But basically, she is from Wakanda. And with her being from Wakanda, of course, she was recruited by a group of females who are known as the Balu Aye. Now, Balu Aye is basically a group of females who protect Wakanda in a magical way. And of course, every few years, they do take in a new female to basically learn how to protect Wakanda in a very magical way. Now, with that being said, though, she was basically taken in. And this is where we kind of learn about the idea of Kraven having when it comes to burying people in the ground. Because in that culture right there, in that group, you are basically buried in the ground as a way to fight your inner demons. But of course, after you take the herb that basically knocks you out to help you fight against your inner demons, you are buried in the ground. But every time you come out of the ground, if you come out still savage, you are put right back in the ground over and over again until you come out of the ground not as a savage person, because it's supposed to teach you the actual way of hunting, not as a savage, but as a professional, as someone who has a soul, actually. And so, of course, she was put in the ground over and over and over again to learn how to not be a savage person. Now, right after she was basically able to kind of deal with her demons, she was basically saying to herself that she still had some inner demons in there that she was battling. But the inner demon that she was battling was more the idea of lust. Now, it wasn't her kind of lusting for a man, but instead it was her lusting for travel. She wanted to see the world. The problem is, though, when you leave the group that had recruited her to help protect Wakanda, you are no longer welcome back to Wakanda completely. The entire country. Not just the group, but the entire country. And so, of course, she knew if she left, she could never come back. But of course, she made that choice because she wanted to travel around the world to see what the world is like, to learn more about the world. Now, we actually do pick up with Gregor. And right now, you have Gregor basically trying to do some recruitment. Because it's Gregor realizing that with his mother around, but also Peter Parker being around still, he might need some extra help. Now, he does not go after, regular people or somebody with powers. Instead, he recruits animals. And he does kind of give the animals strength to kind of help him be able to complete his task. And so this is him saying, I am going to use the animals to make sure I am able to actually defeat my mother, but also defeat Spider-Man as well. But getting back into the origin of Aja, we actually do pick up with her right now, kind of telling us that after she left Wakanda, she basically left Africa completely and she came to New York. And of course, as she arrived in New York and kind of been able to experience different kinds of parts of New York, she did run into a man. And that man was Dr. Henry McKay. Now, of course, Henry McKay died. But of course, right before he died, he got Aja pregnant. And of course, she was pregnant with Gregor. But she did not name her son Gregor. Actually, she named him Takhar. But either way, though, she named her son Takhar. And so Gregor is not his real name. But of course, she said, I met someone, I love someone, I lost that person, but I was given the chance to love somebody else, my son. But right after her husband died and a couple years after raising her son, she did run into Kraven. And this kind of gives us the origin of Kraven right here. Because she does tell us that when she met Kraven, he was a man who was basically broken. It was a man who had horrible parents. His family lost everything. And so, of course, it's her kind of feeling bad for Kraven. But of course, she built a bond with him. And so did Takhar, aka aka Gregor. Sorry about that, y'all. But either way, though, her and her son built a bond with Kraven. And they had this bond. And of course, it grew and grew and grew. And so then she said, you know what? I'm going to teach Kraven some of the ways that I learned in Wakanda. And so, of course, one of the things she wanted to teach him was that when it comes to animals, animals are not just for hunting. Sometimes animals can be used as teachers. They can teach you how the land worked in the world. And so, of course, you had her take Kraven back to Africa, hoping that her lessons would show him the way of the land, the way of the animals. The problem is, though, some of her lessons did not actually stick the way she was hoping. And of course, she did see some kind of lust for blood in Kraven, lust for violence, lust for hunting. And of course, she knew that maybe she had messed up. Now, of course, with her kind of realizing that there was something wrong with Kraven, some kind of inner demon battle, that basically she felt like maybe the same ritual that had basically helped her could help him as well. And so, of course, you do have Aya say, you know what? I am going to bury you in the ground, and hopefully that ritual will basically help you to fight your inner demons. And of course, she buried him. The problem is, though, the process should have lasted 2 weeks. For Kraven, it lasted 4 weeks. And the question she had was, did he actually battle against his inner demons, or did he lose against his inner demons, or maybe his soul was just too scared to confront his inner demons? Either way, though, the ritual still failed. And with it failing, of course, she realized that she had messed up, because when he came out of the ground only 4 days later, he was completely different. But he began to move away from her. He basically said that she was an enemy. He felt like the entire time that she was around, instead of trying to heal him, she was there around to basically hurt him. And so he began to move away. But because Kraven had built a bond with her, but also with her son, Gregor, aka Taka, you had Taka basically leave his mother behind and follow along with Kraven like a stepson. And it's kind of like, oh my God, that is how Gregor kind of got wrapped in with Kraven so long ago. But getting back over to Peter Parker and Mary Jane, we actually do see that Peter Parker was able to kind of fight against his inner demons. And thanks to Mary Jane, really, that she was actually able to help her husband fight against whatever that was going on in his mind. But of course, right after that, you do have Aja appear. And she's kind of like, listen, it is great that your husband was able to fight against his inner demons, but my son Gregor is still coming after him, and we have to get you guys somewhere safe. But the problem is, though, as soon as she said that, she's too late. Gregor has arrived for the final battle between him and his mother, and of course, the final chapter of this storyline. And so as we get into the final chapter, of course, you do have Aja tell Peter Parker, Mary Jane, y'all gotta go. Leave right now. I'll stay behind and basically finally end this. But you need to go to my place. There is something there, Peter Parker, for you that can basically help you out down the road. That's all she says. Now, of course, you have Peter like, no, I need to stay to help you out. Because right now, he could literally defeat you, and then what? It still comes down to me. But you didn't have Mary Jane say, Peter, for once, can you let somebody else do the job for you? Because it's her telling her husband, you have to realize that in reality, you are only going to get in the way. And that is it. You are not going to be somebody actually helping out. You will not be beneficial at all. You will just be in the way. So stop. Let's go right now. She even says there's something in her house that could help us down the road. Let us leave while she tries to fight against Gregor. Now, of course, this is a very hard battle for Aja, because right now she's fighting against Gregor, but she's also fighting against animals. Not animal spirits, actual animals. And so, of course, these animals are kind of giving her some kind of challenge, because you have a lion, you have an elephant, you have all these different kinds of animals who are basically attacking her left and right. But of course, she's able to take on every single one of them, up to the point where she does do some kind of ritual that kind of release the animals from Gregor's hold. And so these animals do leave Gregor's side to go back to where they came from. And so now it should be just down to her and Gregor, except she forgot about one particular animal. And of course, that animal is the vulture. And of course, before this battle, Gregor had dipped the vulture's talons in some kind of poison. And so, of course, when the vulture kind of scratched her arm, it released some kind of poison in her body that's making her weak. And of course, it's not going to kill her, but of course, it's going to stop her. And so this is Gregor saying, I'm not going to kill you because you're my mother. But of course, I need you right now out of my way, so that I'll be able to actually finish what I'm trying to finish, which is killing off Peter Parker. Now, when we actually jump over to Peter Parker, you do have Peter Parker and Mary Jane go to the house that belongs to Aja. And of course, they're wondering what in the world did she mean, where that basically there's something there for him that could technically help him down the road. And of course, when they go inside her house and they go to the basement, they do find something down there. And of course, that something is a spider armor. And of course, the spider armor was one of the many different outfits that Peter Parker had in the 1990s. But either way, it's basically an armor suit. And so, of course, if Peter is going to battle against Gregor, he can wear this battle suit. And of course, he does. And so now we're getting that battle. Peter Parker versus Gregor. And of course, Peter Parker has to be very careful because even with the battle armor, he still does not know how to fight just like Gregor does. And so we're hoping that he'll be able to pull this fight off somehow. And so, of course, we do get that battle. We do get Peter Parker fighting against Gregor. But what I do want to point out is that when it comes to this battle, you can see that Peter Parker is very determined not to lose here. It's Peter Parker want to make sure that he actually does win this battle. It is Peter Parker saying, I cannot afford to lose here because my unborn child, my wife right now is behind me in that house trying to hide. And this man will not stop even after he has killed me. And so I have to make sure I basically win this battle. And of course, even though he is literally unmatched in this battle, it's the idea that Peter Parker is still very determined to do what he needs to do to protect his wife and his unborn child. And so the battle does go on for a few pages, but it does actually lead up to the point where Peter Parker does actually have the chance to kill off Gregor, to kill him, to basically stop him. But of course, Peter Parker is not a killer. It is Peter Parker still hoping that maybe down the road, something good can come out of Gregor. And so you have Peter Parker determined to kind of just walk away from this battle. But of course, Gregor hates the idea that he was given mercy, that basically Peter Parker did not finish the job. And so it's Gregor just very upset with what Peter Parker had actually just did. And so you have Gregor say, no, I am going to kill you. Now, of course, you did have Mary Jane step in. And when she does, it's her trying to explain to Gregor who Peter Parker basically is. That Peter Parker is a guy. He's just a guy. Like you, Kraven and Grim Hunt, you all looked at Peter Parker as like some kind of spider creature, but he's not. He's just a guy who basically risks his life again and again to help other people out. And of course, you knew the truth. You knew that he is not some kind of creature. He's not some kind of animal. That basically he is just a good man. But of course, you could not face the truth. And so, of course, you had to take your hatred and your anger towards Peter for everything that happened to you onto Peter Parker. And so, of course, you are just an angry man who doesn't truly understand. Now, Gregor, he hates to hear that. And so, of course, he wants to kill off Mary Jane. But of course, that is the moment you have Aja appear. And she takes the blade that was meant for Mary Jane to save Mary Jane's life. But of course, Gregor had just stabbed and killed his mother. Now, of course, right after he does that, instantly you have Gregor feel grief because he basically killed his mother. But of course, she knew what she had to do. She had to do something to basically break him out of all this anger and hatred he had towards Peter Parker, towards her, towards the world, because what Kraven had basically put in his mind. And so, of course, his mother does die in his arms. Now, this is basically Gregor saying, fine, if I failed, I must do the same thing that Kraven did when he failed, which was suicide, shoot myself. And so you have Gregor getting ready to basically kill himself until you have Peter Parker basically stop him. And he said, I was not there to stop Kraven, but you know what for sure, going to stop you. I cannot allow you to kill yourself. And of course, that right there told Gregor Peter Parker is correct. That basically, if I do that, it's a coward death. And I need to kind of own up to what I did wrong. And so you have Gregor say, Peter Parker, this war, this battle, this hatred towards you, it's over, and I'm walking away. Goodbye. Now, of course, the story does get wrapped up just like that, really. I mean, you do have a couple more pages where basically you do have Peter Parker and Mary Jane living their life in Oregon, even though we do know what's going to happen literally down the road for them, because, again, this does take place in the middle of the Clone Saga. And of course, we all know the worst thing happens to Mary Jane. But either way, though, after that, we do see Gregor being able to actually bury his mother. But once he does that, we do see a hand pop out. That tells us that Aja is still alive. And there is a possibility that she could appear down the road in later books. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.